And so it is even within our generation, or within the generations that we've seen. Oftentimes when the Lord gets quiet, we turn back. Oftentimes when God gets quiet, we begin to doubt what we've heard. But I'm here to tell you today, the greatest way that you can pass a test, or even when you're in school and you're trying to pass a test, you have to recognize that when you're in the middle of the test, the teacher is silent. When you're in the middle of the exam, the teacher cannot speak to you. And sometimes when we go through seasons where we feel like the Lord is quiet, sometimes when we go through seasons when we say, hey God, I'm not hearing something from you. Sometimes when we go through seasons when we feel like the heavens are closed tight, it's not because of the absence of the Lord, but it's because he's waiting on you to pass that test so he can graduate you to the next level. God is trying to graduate us to the next level. He's trying to take us from one place into the next. But what happened is with the children of Israel, they failed that test. So what happened because they failed that test? They missed out on promise. Meaning that they skipped their destiny. They skipped their destiny. They were left out of their inheritance. They were left out of the commonwealth of Israel because they turned away from him. So while they were murmuring and complaining in the wilderness, God had other plans in mind. And we have to understand with God, although we are precious, although we are valuable, we have to recognize that all of us are replaceable. We have to recognize that in the macro context, in the big picture, God has a will and an assignment that must be accomplished. And whether you want to do it or you want to do it or you want to do it, somebody has to get it done. God has a plan. He has an agenda. And we have to recognize about it his agenda. It's been on his mind or on his heart from eternity. So what God does upon his timeline or on his clock, he begins to bring it tangibly into the earth. So what existed in eternity, what existed in the mind of God has to begin to migrate into the earth realm. And how it begins to migrate into the earth realm, it begins to come into the earth by the obedience of men. We have to recognize that as men and women of God, that we stand as altars. We stand as places of transaction in the spirit. And we have to recognize that where there is an altar, that is when the glory of God begins to move. That is when the power of God begins to ascend. We have to look at even when with the Ark of the Covenant, when the priests would begin to cry out in the Ark and they begin to bow down low and begin to go into the holies of holies. They recognize that the angel of the Lord would come and be able to speak on the Ark. The power of God will begin to come down and begin to move in the midst of them. Why? Because the altar is a place of transaction. It's a place of a shift. It's a place of transformation. It's a place where God begins to move. That's why when we come here, when we come to the altar, when we begin to bow our face to the Lord, when we begin to say, Lord, I surrender, we're making an exchange. It's a transaction that's happening in the realm of the spirit. So in understanding that, we have to know that there is a destiny that is attached to our obedience. I say this often, but we have to recognize that our provision, if there's something that the Lord has called you to, if there's something that he's asked you to do, it's attached to a place. And when I say attached to a place, it's not attached to a physical place, but it's attached to a place called obedience. It's attached to a place called obedience. When we begin to obey the Lord, when we begin to submit to him, that's when his provision, that's when his hand is able to be open to us. Why? Because we have trusted him with our lives. We've trusted him with what we have. So God has an opportunity to begin to multiply and to be able to expand upon what he has already given us. God has plans in mind for us.